Have you ever been to Antarctica?
Yeah.
Do you believe in the ice wall?
Yeah, I saw the ice wall.
Well,
Yeah, he saw it too.
I can't say on stream.
No way. But
'Cause
we'll
he-
talk about it later. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
The governments of the world are lying to you. They sell you a neat, tidy picture of our planet, a globe where every blank space is just a territory yet to be fully explored. They tell you Antarctica is a majestic but dead wasteland of ice and snow, a continent dedicated to science and peace, the God-forsaken bottom of the world. That is the most profound and audacious lie in human history. There is a reason no commercial airliner ever flies over a specific, vast corridor deep within the continent. It isn't due to weather or magnetic interference, as they claim in official documents. It's because what lies there must not be seen from above. There is a reason top-secret military installations consuming billions of taxpayer dollars are positioned in the coldest hell on Earth, guarding what they tell us is nothing. They are guarding a wall. Don't picture a mountain range or a natural ridge. Picture a perfectly vertical, impossibly smooth barrier of hyper-compressed ice soaring 3 kilometers into the sky and stretching for thousands of kilometers inland, vanishing beyond the curve of the Earth. Nature does not create straight lines. I know what's behind it, and that knowledge has cost me everything. My name is Ben Carter. I was once a senior military engineer, a specialist in deep penetrating radar systems. I was a patriot. When I was headhunted for a clandestine assignment codenamed Operation Ice Veil, I felt a surge of pride. They told me my job was to monitor climate change at the most critical point on the globe. It was the most important lie I was ever told. In truth, myself and hundreds of others, scientists, soldiers, technicians, were not researchers. We were prison wardens, sentinels. Our task was to ensure that the greatest secret in human history remained buried beneath the eternal ice. A secret so monumental, it would not just change, but shatter humanity's entire understanding of itself, its history, and its place in the cosmos. Now, I'm a fugitive. I'm considered a traitor to my country, but I'm willing to risk it all to tell you the truth, to tell you what is really hiding behind the ice wall of Antarctica. The journey to Antarctica was the first layer of the indoctrination. We didn't fly in to the well-known McMurdo Station, the bustling scientific hub featured in documentaries. Our ride was an unmarked C-17 Globemaster, a military transport plane stripped of any identifying insignia, its windows blacked out. It landed on a blue ice runway so secret it exists on no published map, a ghost strip in a sea of white. From there, we were loaded into behemoth-tracked carriers, windowless and insulated, feeling less like transport and more like mobile vaults. For 36 agonizing hours, we rumbled across an endless, featureless expanse. The only sensations were the deep, droning vibration of the engine and the disorienting, claustrophobic feeling of being swallowed whole by the continent. Our destination was a facility codenamed Station Erebus. From the surface, it was nearly invisible, 90% of its mass buried deep beneath the ice sheet like a concrete dagger. Only a cluster of communications arrays and a heavily fortified bunker-like entrance broke the blinding monotony of the landscape. This was no research outpost. It was a fortress, a modern-day castle made of steel, concrete, and secrets. The air inside didn't just feel cold, it felt manufactured, recycled to a razor's edge of sterility. The corridors were long, stark white and lit by humming fluorescent panels that never dimmed, creating a permanent, dayless existence. There was no personal art on the walls, no casual chatter in the mess hall. There was only the low, omnipresent thrum of the base's geothermal power core and the quiet, unnerving professionalism of the people who moved through the halls like ghosts. The rules were hammered into us from the moment we arrived. They were simple and absolute. Rule 1, you do not discuss your specific work with anyone outside your direct need-to-know department, ever. Rule 2, you do not attempt to access any data or physical area of the base beyond your granted security clearance. Curiosity was not a virtue here, it was a liability. Rule 3, and the most severe, you do not, under any circumstances, approach the perimeter line. We were told this wasn't a disciplinary matter. Violation of Rule 3, our orientation officer said with a dead-eyed stare, is a matter of survival. My lab was a technological marvel, a Faraday cage buried 1,000 feet beneath the surface, shielded from any form of external electronic interference. On my first official briefing, my commanding officer, a gaunt, tight-lipped man named Colonel Vance, showed me what I would truly be monitoring. He brought up the main long-range ground-penetrating radar display. I expected to see complex geological strata, subterranean lakes, the slow, grinding flow of the ice. Instead, I saw a line. A perfectly straight, impossibly long, stark black line that bisected the entire continent on the holographic map. That, Vance said, his voice a low, gravelly hum that the sound-dampened room seemed to swallow, is your new god. You watch it. You listen to it. You report any energy fluctuation, any seismic tremor, any change in mass, no matter how microscopic. You do not ask what it is, and you do not speculate why it's there. Your job is to be a sentry on the wall at the end of the world. As I stared at that stark digital line, a feature too perfect for nature to have ever conceived, I felt a deep primal chill that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold. It was the chilling certainty of standing on the precipice of a secret so vast it had to be guarded by its own silent army, buried under miles of ice at the very bottom of the planet. I wasn't an engineer anymore. I was a guard, and our prison was an entire continent.
Days bled into the long, artificial night of the Antarctic winter. The routine at Station Erebus was a masterpiece of psychological conditioning, designed to numb the mind into a state of unquestioning obedience. Shifts were 12 hours long, 6 days a week. Communication with the outside world was a monthly, heavily censored 20-line email. The only view of Antarctica was the grainy black and white feed from the perimeter cameras, showing nothing but a landscape of howling wind and shifting snow. My official duty was to monitor the structural integrity of the perimeter, which was a clinical, sanitized term for listening to its heartbeat. My array of sensors, seismographs, magnetometers, ground-penetrating radar, were all aimed at that one monolithic feature. For the first few months, the data was predictable. The low-level energy hum was a constant, a baseline vibration that my predecessors had logged for decades. It wasn't the groaning of ice or the shifting of tectonic plates. It was a steady, resonant frequency, almost like the idling engine of some colossal sleeping machine. Then came the anomalies. They started small, brief, powerful bursts of energy that would flare across my sensors for a few milliseconds before vanishing. They defied any natural explanation. They weren't solar flares. Our arrays were shielded 1,000 feet beneath the surface. They weren't geological. They left no seismic echo. They were clean, structured, and focused, like a coded message screamed into the void. When I first logged these events, Colonel Vance visited my lab personally. He stood behind me, a gaunt shadow smelling of stale coffee and authority, and watched the playback. Atmospheric distortions reflecting off the ionosphere, he stated, his voice flat and final. It wasn't an explanation, it was an order to believe the lie. I knew my equipment. I knew the difference between random noise and a coherent signal. So I started keeping a second set of logs, encrypted and hidden on a private server partition. I meticulously recorded every anomaly, building a library of these impossible energy bursts. I began running decryption algorithms on them, searching for patterns, for repetition, for anything that resembled a language. One night, during a particularly powerful and sustained energy surge, something new bled through the static. It was an audio signal, piggybacking on the main energy wave. Faint, distorted, but undeniably there. I diverted the signal, filtering out the overwhelming electromagnetic noise. And then I heard them. Whispers. They weren't human voices. The cadence, the pitch, the very texture of the sound was alien. There were soft, resonant clicks, deep guttural tones that vibrated in my chest, and high, ethereal whistles that seemed to dance at the very edge of human hearing. I spent hours isolating the fragments, looping them, trying to find a pattern. It was a language. I was certain of it. A cold dread, mingled with an electrifying sense of discovery, washed over me. The official story was a lie. The perimeter wasn't a natural wall of ice. It was a transmitter, or worse, a cage, and something inside it was starting to wake up. My obsession with the signals became my entire world. Sleep became a fleeting necessity, a frustrating interruption to my work. The sterile white walls of Station Erebus, once just a workplace, now felt like the padded interior of an asylum, and I was its sole, sane patient. I started to see the lies everywhere, not just in Vance's dismissive explanations, but in the very architecture of the base. The sensor arrays weren't just pointed at the perimeter. They were designed to form a perfect containment field. The deep Earth geothermal core wasn't just for power. Its vibrations were tuned to a specific frequency, a constant, low-level hum that I now suspect was designed to suppress or mask the signals from the wall. I knew I couldn't break the code on my own. I needed more data, context, history. The official mission logs were heavily redacted, but I was an engineer. I knew how systems worked, and I knew that every system has a back door. During my designated downtime, I began mapping the base's internal network architecture. It was a digital fortress, layered with firewalls and intrusion countermeasures. But it was built by humans, and humans make mistakes. I found one, an old diagnostic port in a forgotten maintenance sublevel. A relic from the base's initial construction phase that had never been properly decommissioned. It was a huge risk. Accessing the network from an unauthorized port would trigger silent alarms, logging my every move. I had to be a ghost. I built a series of cascading proxies and spoofed my credentials, making my intrusion look like a low-level system diagnostic, a flicker of noise in the constant stream of data. For weeks, I spent my nights in the frigid cold of that sublevel, my fingers numb as I typed, slowly, painstakingly sifting through petabytes of classified data. I started in the archives, in the digital dustbin of the 1960s when Operation Iceveil was first initiated. What I found chilled me to the bone. The initial survey team hadn't discovered a geological anomaly. The declassified field reports, buried under layers of encryption, were explicit. They found a structure. The logs described drilling attempts where advanced, diamond-tipped drill heads shattered against a surface the drills couldn't even scratch. Sonar scans returned impossible readings of a perfectly smooth, non-porous material extending miles deep into the Earth's crust. But the most terrifying discovery was in the bioanalysis reports. They found microorganisms in the ice core samples taken near the wall surface that were not carbon-based. They were silicon-based life forms, dormant but perfectly preserved, with a genetic structure so complex it made human DNA look like a child's drawing. And then I found the file. Codenamed Project Echo, it was a short-lived attempt in the early 1970s to send a powerful, active signal directly at the wall, hoping for a response. They got one. For 13 terrifying minutes, the wall responded with a massive burst of energy and a single, coherent signal. The file contained the audio. It was a scream, a psychic, telepathic scream that was broadcast across all frequencies. The log detailed how every person on the base suffered from simultaneous debilitating migraines, hallucinations, and cerebral hemorrhaging. 5 scientists died. After that, the mission directive changed. Project Echo was buried, and Operation Icevale shifted from discovery to containment, from science to imprisonment. We weren't just guarding a secret. We were guarding a sleeping god, and my whispers were proof that it was beginning to stir in its slumber.
The revelation of Project Echo sent a cold fist of dread clenching around my heart. We weren't just dealing with an unknown technology or a hidden structure. We were dealing with a life form, a consciousness so vast and powerful that even a brief attempted communication had resulted in death. And my unauthorized listening was potentially poking a sleeping giant. I knew I had to be more careful, more methodical. The whispers were still faint, sporadic, but I was starting to recognize patterns, recurring sequences of clicks and tones that felt deliberate. It was like trying to learn a language by eavesdropping on fragmented phone calls. My engineering background became my most valuable asset. If the wall was emitting energy, it needed a power source. The base's geothermal tap was substantial, but I doubted it was the sole provider for something of that scale. I started analyzing the base's power grid schematics, looking for unusual energy draws for circuits that didn't quite match the official blueprints. I found one, a dedicated high-capacity power line that ran directly from the geothermal core towards the perimeter. It wasn't on the main schematics. It was a ghost line, buried deep within the infrastructure. Its existence confirmed my suspicions. The base wasn't just observing the wall. It was actively interacting with it, feeding it energy, keeping it contained, or perhaps alive. I needed to see it for myself, to trace that hidden power line and see where it led. The official access points to the perimeter were heavily guarded, but I knew the maintenance tunnels and service shafts better than anyone. I started planning a route, a subterranean journey that would take me beyond the security checkpoints and to the base of the wall itself. It was a fool's errand, a suicide mission if I were caught, but the weight of the secret, the implications of what lay dormant beneath the ice had become unbearable. I couldn't just listen to the whispers anymore. I had to see the source. I had to know the truth, even if it cost me everything. Under the cover of a routine equipment check in a remote sensor array near the perimeter's surface entrance, I began my descent. I carried a modified thermal imaging scanner, a Geiger counter, and a small high-resolution camera hidden in my toolkit. My heart hammered against my ribs with a mixture of terror and grim determination. I was going off script. I was crossing the line, and there was no turning back. The air in the maintenance tunnels was frigid, the silence broken only by the drip of condensation and the distant hum of the base's machinery. The deeper I went, the stronger the low-level vibration from the wall became, a palpable thrumming that resonated in my very bones. And then, etched into the cold concrete walls of the tunnel, I saw them, the symbols. They were unlike anything I had ever seen, intricate geometric patterns that pulsed with a faint internal luminescence. They were the same patterns I had glimpsed in the Project Echo files, the same alien script that flickered in the energy bursts from the wall. They weren't just markings. They felt like a language, a warning etched into the very fabric of this subterranean prison. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was on the right path. I was getting closer to the truth. And whatever that truth was, the people who ran Station Erebus were desperate to keep it hidden. The maintenance tunnel grew colder and narrower, the pristine concrete of the base giving way to rough-hewn rock and ice. The glowing symbols became more frequent, their intricate patterns covering the walls, floor, and ceiling, turning the passage into a gallery of alien hieroglyphs. The low hum I had felt for months was now a powerful, bone-jarring vibration, a physical presence in the suffocating darkness. After what felt like hours of cautious navigation, the tunnel ended abruptly.
It opened into a cavern so vast my headlamp's beam was swallowed by the oppressive darkness. I switched to my thermal scanner. The view that bloomed into existence on the small screen stole the air from my lungs. The cavern was artificial. Its walls were perfectly symmetrical, curving upwards to a ceiling I couldn't see. And in the center, dominating the space, was the source of the hum. It was a colossal, perfectly cubic structure, at least 100 meters on each side, made of the same dark, non-reflective material described in the Project Echo files. The hidden power line I had been tracing terminated here, snaking out of the tunnel and plugging directly into the cube's base like an umbilical cord. This was it. This was the antechamber, the heart of the prison. The cube was a conduit, a regulator, funneling power from our geothermal plant into the much larger structure beyond it, the wall itself, which formed the cavern's far side. I approached the cube cautiously. Its surface was cold to the touch, yet the thermal scanner showed a massive amount of energy flowing within it, a silent, contained storm. The alien symbols were etched across its surface, not glowing like the ones in the tunnel, but dormant and dark. As I circled the structure, I found what I was looking for: an access panel. It seemed so perfectly machined they were nearly invisible. Beside it was a recessed interface, a hollowed-out section shaped like a human hand. My mind raced. Was this a control panel? A keyhole? I thought of the whispers, the telepathic scream from the Project Echo report. This wasn't just technology. It was biotechnology. It was designed to interface with an organic being. My hand trembled as I lifted it towards the interface. Was this what they were so afraid of? Not that something would get out, but that someone would get in? The moment my palm touched the cold surface, the entire cavern was plunged into a blinding flash of blue-white light. The dormant symbols on the cube and all around the cavern ignited simultaneously. The humming intensified into a deafening roar, and a wave of psychic energy washed over me. 1,000 alien voices screaming in my mind. It wasn't a scream of rage, but of recognition, of awakening. My vision swam with impossible images, galaxies being born and dying, cities of light spanning entire continents under alien suns, and the slow, silent journey of a colossal intelligence across the void of space. I saw its arrival on a primordial Earth, and I felt its immense loneliness as it settled into a long, cold slumber beneath the ice. Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The light subsided, the humming roar returned to its steady vibration, and the screaming in my head faded to a single, clear, and terrifyingly close whisper. "Who are you?" it asks, not in a language of words, but in a language of pure thought, directly into the core of my consciousness. The telepathic probe was like a physical blow. Yet it didn't bring pain, only an overwhelming sense of ancient curiosity. For a moment, I was paralyzed, my mind reeling from the influx of alien consciousness. Then, a primal instinct for survival kicked in. I had to respond, to communicate. Closing my eyes, I focused all my mental energy, pushing past the fear and the awe. I projected my own thoughts, the simplest, most fundamental concepts I could grasp. Human, engineer. I came to understand. The response was immediate, a wave of understanding washing over me. There was no malice, no threat, only a profound sense of weariness. Long sleep. Cold. I projected again, trying to convey the passage of time as I understood it. Millions of years, the world has changed. A flicker of something akin to surprise touched my mind. Surface life. Evolved? The exchange was exhausting, like trying to speak a language I had never learned, but the connection was undeniable. This being, this intelligence housed within the ice, was aware, ancient, and incredibly powerful, and it was lonely. I cautiously opened my eyes.
The blue light on the cube had subsided, the symbols dimming back to their dormant state. The humming was still present, but it felt less aggressive now, almost conversational. I spent what felt like an eternity in that cavern, engaged in a silent dialogue with the entity. I learned that it was part of a collective consciousness, a race of interstellar travelers who had seeded life across countless galaxies. Their outpost in Antarctica was meant to be a silent archive, a dormant seed waiting for the right conditions for awakening. Something on Earth, millennia ago, had triggered an early stasis, a forced slumber that had lasted eons. My unauthorized probing, my accidental activation of the interface had been the catalyst for its reawakening. It had sensed my consciousness, my curiosity, and had reached out. It showed me glimpses of its history, of civilizations rising and falling, of cosmic events that dwarfed human understanding. It spoke of its purpose, not of conquest or destruction, but of preservation, of knowledge, and of the interconnectedness of all life in the universe. The fear began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of wonder and a crushing weight of responsibility. The governments of the world weren't just hiding an alien, they were suppressing knowledge that could revolutionize human understanding of our place in the cosmos. They had reacted out of fear, out of a desire to control the unknown, and in doing so, they had imprisoned not just an alien intelligence, but the potential of our own species. The entity then projected a sense of urgency. They will know. Your touch, your mind, you must leave now. Along with the warning came a pathway, a series of mental coordinates leading to another exit, a route that would bypass the main base and take me closer to the surface. It was a parting gift, a silent promise of more to come, if I survived. The connection faded, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of the cavern, the weight of its revelations pressing down on me. I knew I couldn't stay. My presence had been detected. The ghost in the machine was awake, and the guardians of the ice would soon know that their secret was compromised. The mental map provided by the entity was clear, a series of twists and turns through subterranean passages I hadn't known existed. The urgency in the entity's telepathic warning propelled me forward. I had to move fast. My unauthorized access to the alien structure would have triggered alarms, and Colonel Vance wouldn't hesitate to send security teams after me. The passage was narrower than the maintenance tunnels, more like a natural cave system, though the smooth, dark walls hinted at artificial construction beneath the rough exterior. The glowing symbols were less frequent here, but I could still feel the faint thrumming vibration of the alien intelligence, a guiding pulse in the darkness. I moved with a speed born of adrenaline and fear, my headlamp cutting a frantic swath through the gloom. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and a faint, metallic tang that I now associated with the cube. I kept glancing back, half expecting to see the beam of a security flashlight or hear the echo of boots on the stone. The mental map led me upwards, through increasingly tight squeezes and over treacherous, ice-slicked inclines. It felt like I was climbing out of the very bowels of the earth. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a larger chamber. The air here was different, colder, drier, carrying the unmistakable scent of fresh Antarctic snow. A faint light filtered down from above. Looking up, I saw a narrow shaft leading to the surface, partially obscured by a thick layer of snow. It was an old ventilation shaft, long since abandoned, and not marked on any of the base's current schematics. The entity had shown me a hidden escape route, a ghost exit from a ghost facility. Climbing the shaft was a brutal test of strength and endurance. The metal rungs were icy and loose, and the shaft seemed to go on forever. But the thought of what I had discovered and the urgency of the entity's warning kept me going. Finally, with a gasp, I hauled myself out onto the surface. The biting Antarctic wind hit me like a physical force, a stark contrast to the warm and still air of the underground chambers. I was in a remote area several kilometers from the main base, surrounded by a desolate expanse of snow and ice, under a gray sky heavy with the promise of more snow. The perimeter wall loomed in the distance, a stark white scar against the gray horizon. I was out, but I was exposed. Station Erebus was a fortress, and I was now an escaped prisoner in the most hostile environment on Earth. I knew they would be searching for me. My only hope was to disappear into the vastness of Antarctica and somehow find a way to share what I had learned with the world. The truth behind the ice wall was too important to remain buried.
Emerging onto the Antarctic surface was less a liberation and more a transfer to a different kind of prison. The landscape was a monochrome canvas of white and gray, stretching to a seemingly infinite horizon. The wind howled relentlessly, biting through my thermal gear, and the temperature was plummeting. My only supplies were the few tools I had managed to carry from the base: a multi-tool, a thermal blanket, and the small encrypted data drive containing my logs. I knew Station Erebus wouldn't take long to realize I was gone. Their surveillance systems were extensive, and my unauthorized network access would be a blaring red flag. My only advantage was the sheer scale of the Antarctic wilderness. Finding one man in this vast expanse would be like finding a grain of sand on an endless beach. My immediate goal was to put as much distance between myself and the base as possible before they could pinpoint my location. I started walking, using the distant, imposing silhouette of the perimeter wall as a rough guide. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep moving. The days and nights blurred into a grueling cycle of walking, finding meager shelter behind ice ridges, and rationing my limited energy bars. The silence was broken only by the screech of the wind and the crunch of my boots on the snow. Loneliness became a constant companion, a whispering doubt that gnawed at my resolve. Had I imagined it all? Was the telepathic contact just a hallucination brought on by stress and sleep deprivation? But then I would remember the cold, hard data on my drive, the impossible energy signatures, the alien whispers, and the chilling details of Project Echo. And I would remember the profound sense of ancient intelligence that had touched my mind in the cavern. It was real, and the world needed to know. After days of relentless travel, the landscape began to subtly change. The perfectly flat expanse gave way to more varied terrain. Sastrugi fields, treacherous crevices hidden beneath thin layers of snow, and towering ice formations sculpted by the wind into bizarre, otherworldly shapes. I knew I was moving further inland, away from the immediate vicinity of Station Erebus. One particularly harsh night, huddled beneath my thermal blanket, I thought I saw something in the distance, a faint, flickering light against the dark horizon. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the eye, a hallucination brought on by stress and sleep deprivation. But it persisted. Hope, a dangerous and unfamiliar emotion in this frozen wasteland, flickered within me. Could it be another research station? Another human presence in this desolate land? Or something else entirely? Something connected to the intelligence behind the ice wall. The possibility, however slim, spurred me onward. The risk of encountering whatever made that light was outweighed by the desperate need for contact, for proof that I wasn't alone in this terrifying truth. The journey towards the faint light was a desperate pilgrimage fueled by the last dregs of my strength. For 2 days, it remained a tantalizing, distant flicker, a ghost on the horizon. Finally, as I crested a massive ice dune, I saw its source. It was not a research station. Nestled in a small, wind-sheltered basin was a single, sleek metallic object. It was a craft of some kind, roughly the size of a small jet, its hull made of the same, non-reflective material as the cube and the wall. It was partially buried in the snow, looking as if it had rested there for centuries. The light I had seen was a soft, pulsating glow emanating from a viewport on its side. It was a beacon, and it was waiting for me. As I stumbled closer, a ramp silently lowered from the craft's side. There was no sign of any occupants, no visible threat, only a silent invitation. My fear was gone, replaced by a profound sense of destiny. This was not a random encounter. The entity had guided me here. Inside, the craft was Spartan. A single, pilot-like chair sat before a vast panoramic viewport that currently displayed a star chart of impossible complexity. As I stepped onto the ramp, the chair swiveled to face me, and a holographic interface shimmered to life in the air before it. The familiar, intricate symbols I had seen in the tunnels and on the cube danced across the display. A wave of telepathic communication, clearer and stronger than before, washed over me. It was the same entity, the intelligence from behind the wall. "You are the first," it projected, the thought resonating with a sense of ancient gravity. The first to listen, the first to understand. It explained that this small craft was a scout ship, a messenger pod, left dormant for this very purpose. The governments of the world had found the wall, but their fear had blinded them. They had treated it as a threat to be contained, not a message to be deciphered. My actions, my intrusion, had been the unexpected key that had unlocked a new possibility for contact. The entity offered me a choice. I could use this ship. Its systems were linked to my data drive, capable of broadcasting my logs, the truth of Project Echo, and the reality of the wall to every unsecured network on the planet. It would be an instantaneous, undeniable revelation, a tidal wave of truth that would shatter the secrecy of Operation Icevale forever. Or I could leave, attempt to return to civilization on my own, and try to convince a world conditioned to disbelief. There was no choice to make. "The world deserves to know," I projected back, a single thought filled with all my conviction. A sense of profound ancient approval was the last thing I felt from the entity. The ramp sealed behind me, and the star chart on the viewport began to shift, replaced by a global communications map. I sat in the chair, took a deep breath, and initiated the broadcast. I don't know what happened after that. I don't know if the world descended into chaos or if it was elevated into a new era of understanding. My part of the story is over. I am simply the messenger. I have delivered the truth from the silent, frozen heart of Antarctica. The truth is out there, buried not only under miles of ice, but under decades of lies. Now, it is up to you to decide what to do with it.